Welcome to the Stupid Fans Club. I am your host, Sean Don, and welcome to the club. Listen, if you are not already subscribed, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. We are exclusively on YouTube here, and we do post clips on our Instagram and TikTok. So please make sure you follow those pages as well. But listen, this is all college football on this episode, and we had another great weekend. We are going to go through some recaps from last week. Got a top 5 list that I want to go through, and we're going to go through some quick hits, of course, and the top 25 rankings, and finish out with the must-see TV games. So, looking forward to this episode, and let's jump right into it. Big game this weekend with Texas versus Vanderbilt. This was on my must-see TV game last week, and it didn't disappoint. Texas escapes Vandy 27-24. They pretty much held Vandy off there in the end, but it was a good late run by Vandy. But I can say for the majority of the game, Texas was in control. The score is probably a little closer than what it actually felt. Vandy did score late to cut it to a field goal lead, but pretty much felt like Texas kind of had this one in the bag and controlled the game. They were clearly the better team and showed it for the majority of the game there. Did get off to a shaky start. I think Quinn Ewers had a interception that was deflected at the line, and Vanderbilt kind of had some momentum there. But for the most part, I felt like Texas came out there and showed their dominance, showed that they are a superior team, and got back on track. So a good bounce back win for Texas. Very, very much needed there for them, and kind of get their confidence back after that tough Georgia loss last week. The question here is for me, can Texas win out? So they had that tough loss against Georgia, and then another tight game against Vanderbilt. You know, they are now full swing SEC play here, and so they get a bye week, and then they have Florida at Arkansas, Kentucky, and at Texas A&M. You gotta like the rest of that schedule pretty much all the way till you get to the last game. Now, these are tough SEC teams, so you can't just overlook them. We saw Arkansas was able to knock off Tennessee earlier this year, and Kentucky was able to beat Ole Miss earlier this year. And then even Florida was able to go down to the wire, I believe, overtime with Tennessee. So I think they do have some tough games, but I like Texas' chances in 3 of those 4 games. At Texas A&M, I almost say this every week, they have one of the toughest environments to play in. And so Texas having to go there to end their season, you know, you're going to have to come with it. We'll see where Texas A&M is by the end of the season. That's the end of November, end of next month here. So we'll see where they are and how good of a matchup that'll be. We'll actually get to Texas A&M here next, but I do think Texas can win out. And listen, we got Penn State and Ohio State this weekend. Those are the 3 and 4 teams in the rankings. And so, you know, one of those teams is going to drop. If Texas can continue to take care of business, you like their chances of potentially ending up in that top 4. And, you know, that could easily be for the SEC championship game at Texas A&M for Texas, because they are right now, Texas A&M is at the top of the conference, and then it's Georgia. So, you know, if Texas A&M takes another loss and you got 2 1-loss teams with Georgia and Texas, you know, you get that rematch. That would be some fun football right there down there in Atlanta for the championship. So I think they can win out. That was a good showing for them against a tough, just physical Vanderbilt team who truly believes it was a road game. So good bounce back win for Texas. I felt like, it got tight there in the end, but for the most part, I felt like they controlled that game very well. And let's see, a lot of exciting football coming up. We'll see where they end. And then we got Texas A&M's big win over LSU, 38-23. That quarterback change really sparked their big win. That was a heck of a game. It was a game where LSU got off to a great start. I believe they were up by 2 scores in that game, 17-7, I believe. And look, LSU was controlling the game, and then it was just it was too many turnovers, too many untimely turnovers on LSU's part. Nussmeier had 3 interceptions this game, and that ultimately cost them. They just gave Texas A&M too many opportunities. And then, of course, we know about the quarterback change there that kind of gave Texas A&M the spark that they needed, and they ultimately took off. I mean, you can't even tell by the score, but, this was a game where LSU started out in control early. Marcel Reed came in and again just gave them a different look, gave them a different spark. He was a lot more mobile there at quarterback, and that launched them into the win for them. I say it all the time, but there's something about that electric stadium. They have a solid defense there. So, I mean, they're just a tough team to play, and they are sitting at the top of the conference, the only undefeated in conference SEC team left. So, I mean, there's a lot to like with Texas A&M, and again, they're knocking these teams off. They just beat LSU. They killed Missouri earlier when Missouri was still a top 10 team, and really the only blemish on their resume is that week 1 loss to Notre Dame. So very dangerous team here, and a big win for them. And I think now we have to discuss, naturally, Texas A&M's quarterback dilemma here. This is going to make for an interesting thing because, you just weren't getting enough production from Connor Wegman. The offense was flat. And then Reed comes in and gives them that spark, running the football, not necessarily throwing, even though he was perfect throwing and threw for 70 yards, but he was 2 for 2. So he was clearly in there to be a running threat, and ran the option well. But we've seen this before. Like, you make that quarterback change mid-game, and in the flow of things, and in that particular game, and that environment, you're at home, you got the crowd behind you, it works. It gives you the spark you're looking for, and you're like, oh, okay, this is perfect. And then we've seen it, trying to move forward with that when a team really has time to prepare and strategize and game plan around that type of quarterback. We've seen it kind of either fade or backfire, and it doesn't provide that same spark to your offense. So I think Texas A&M, obviously, they're going to have to make a decision here. I believe Connor Wegman has gotten you this far. I'm not sure if he's, played poorly and they're still winning or what, but maybe it was just a bad game and you let him have a fresh start next game. Marcel Reed is a great runner, but the problem is he seems, and I've only gotten a glimpse at him, and he seems electric running the football, but it seems like it may be a one-dimensional thing. It was just straight option plays while he was in there, and when he did back out, if his first read wasn't there, he was going to take off and run. And it's kind of simple quarterback play, not a lot of it's kind of what you want to do. You lean toward that quarterback strength, especially when you have to put him in the middle of the game. And again, it worked. at that game, but I question if that's sustainable. So right now, I would probably lead towards Connor Wegman and see if he can give you a little bit more. See if that's just a bad game. But if not, then you got to go with the guy giving you the most production and winning you football games. Because Connor Wegman was playing pretty bad. I think he was like 6 for 14 or something. I don't know. He had a poor game. But listen, great win for Texas A&M. They are a scary team right now. But I do think they have an interesting situation here with their quarterback situation. Something that's going to have to get figured out because there are more tough games on the schedule here, and you're at the top of the SEC right now, so you want to try to win out. Like I said, they have that tough game against Texas at the very end of the year, so you want to try to win out and put yourself in the best situation. And obviously, we know a team kind of only goes as far as their quarterback can take them, unless you have just an electric defense, which they have a good defense, but I don't know if it's just shut you out type of defense. So we'll see. And Ohio State, they are able to hold off Nebraska here 21-17. That was a great game. Nebraska, it's got tight. Nebraska took a late 3-point lead in that fourth quarter. They kind of were, it was a back and forth game. Nebraska had trouble getting things going offensively, but they were making some big stops on the defensive side of things. They stopped, I believe, Ohio State a couple times on 4th and short. And Nebraska scored. I think it was a turnover that put them right there in position to score. I think they got stopped on 4th and goal. Like this game, they had opportunities here for Nebraska to take this one, but Ohio State able to hold them off. My question here for Ohio State is, do we think that they've lived up to the hype? For anyone who was paying attention in the beginning of the season, Ohio State had just the best roster you've ever seen in college football history. Like that was just the talk of it all. Like, how is anybody gonna possibly beat this Ohio State team? They have the best defense in the country. They added Caleb Downs to their secondary, and they do look pretty good on the defensive side, but then you go on their offensive side, you got Jeremiah Smith, you got lightning at your running back position with Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. You got Emeka Ibuka, he's back. I mean, and then Will Howard at your quarterback. They seemed like just an unbeatable team. It was between them and Georgia coming into the season. And, they have been a solid team. They obviously lost a close one to Oregon. I don't know if I can say they've lived up to the hype, but at the same time, to me, they haven't disappointed, right? Like, I think the way this team was being talked about, you were expecting LSU, what was that, 2019 with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and those guys? I was expecting the Georgia 2021 team, like one of those memorable, dominant, just nobody can do anything with them type of teams. And I don't think it's been that. Like, I look at that team and say, wow, they're good. But I don't look at a team and say, who is going to beat them? Like, I think we've already obviously seen them be beat. And then they had a tough one against a challenging, unranked team. So they definitely look beatable. I think you do, like how you had before the season. I think their biggest question mark was, how was Will Howard going to look? And again, he's looked fine. I don't think he's disappointed, but he may be the weakest link on their offense. And again, nothing that they're doing wrong, but the hype was just through the roof for this team coming into the season. So I think they've maybe a little under the hype of what they actually are on the field, but again, not a disappointment at all, and still a big threat. They can easily win. I can't say easily. It's going to be a tough road, but they are definitely a contender to win it all. You can't overlook this team. And listen, I think we'll learn even more next week or this weekend coming up with their matchup against Penn State. Another tough road game for them. I feel like Ohio State is getting payback for all of these seasons in the Big Ten where they play nobody until they play Michigan. If Michigan is even good that year, like they you got to go to Oregon and Penn State. That's brutal, man. The other question here is, speaking of the Penn State game, is this a must win for Ohio State? You've lost one game to Oregon, and Oregon was ranked high at the time. I can't remember exactly where they were ranked when they played them, but fell short that game. And now you got a number 3 ranked team, and you are number 4 in another road game. You don't want the narrative to become Ohio State can't beat good teams. And we've kind of seen how teams are just dropping after that second loss. It looks like they're not overreacting right now to the one loss. Because, I mean, some of these schedules, it's just like Georgia's schedule is like, I mean, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee, Clemson. It's just brutal. Like, you got to anticipate one of those games you're gonna drop. But so it seems like, okay, you lose a game. The second one is where it gets a little tough. The other thing is you got to look at your schedule after it. So I always say it's better to lose early in the season than late, because you have more opportunities to prove yourself if you lose a little earlier. Ideally, obviously, you don't want to lose at all. But after this Penn State game, you got Purdue. You're going to be expected to blow them out. And then you got at Northwestern. You're going to be expected to blow them out. And you got a tough game against Indiana. And then we all know what the Ohio State-Michigan game is to end the season. But Michigan is unranked and not that good this year. Indiana is a good team, but you are the overwhelming favorite in that game, even though Indiana is an undefeated team this year. And I can't wait for that game. It should actually be really good. But you kind of see like it's not a must win, and it obviously depends on how it goes. Like, do you get blown out, or is it like the Oregon game where you lose by a point? So it kind of depends on how this happens, but I think if you lose a close game, you're going to fall maybe in that double digit range because it's your second loss. But I think you still find yourself in the top 12. But then at that point, you got to win out. And of course, the Indiana game is going to be even bigger. And then the Michigan game just speaks for itself, right? That's the game they're saying is Ryan Day's reckoning. So, yeah, I think it's maybe not a must-win game, but it's a game you really, really, really want to win. Like, you don't want to even have to go into the different scenarios of what happens if you are a 2-loss team with like 3 or 4 games still left on your schedule in a 2 really tough and high intensity games too. So we'll see, but super excited about that game. And then Listen, we talk Colorado every week on this pod, and I couldn't be any more proud. Colorado beats Cincinnati. This is one of the games that I was saying, like, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. I'll say, okay, let's just say Colorado isn't able to overcome a Cincinnati team. Folks, Cincinnati is a good football team. They had identical records to Colorado. 5-2, I think 3-1 in the conference. Like, that was a good football team, and Colorado controlled the game. Won a very nice football game. Again, I keep saying it. I don't know why some people don't want to buy in or keep thinking this is some sort of fluke. Colorado is for real this year. Colorado is a real team, and I said it last week. It is time to start taking them seriously. And what do you know? Who popped into the top 25 this week? You can't keep ignoring it. You can't keep ignoring it. They're coming out here and they're beating good teams. I know what happened last year, but even last year was an improvement upon what that program was. And now you're a bowl eligible team, but listen, the way this is looking, you're looking at, why stop here? They could, and I'm not saying they're a college football playoff team, but they could be in a nice, respectable bowl. You don't have to be in the Pop-Tart Bowl. But I think the season is already a success. I've heard Stephen A. go on a nice soliloquy about how Coach Prime is the coach of the year. I completely concur. Barring just a collapse, I think this team could easily win 3 to 4 more games and be a 9 to 10 win team. They're already at 6, and then you got Texas Tech, it's a road game, but we know that Colorado shows up on the road, and that it's like Cincinnati, kind of similar record, similar, nothing scarier about Texas Tech than there was with Cincinnati. And then Utah, they've fallen off the face of the planet. Very winnable game there. Kansas, they put up a good fight against Kansas State, but in-state rival at Kansas, they are not what anybody thought they would be this year. 1-2 games, I think. Winnable game. That could be and then Oklahoma State, they've fallen off as well. So ideally, Colorado could not lose a game for the rest of the season. You don't want to get ahead of yourself. Still good football teams, and they still got to perform. But they keep playing like this. These are games that early in the season you were like scratching your head, like, who is Colorado going to beat? Now it's kind of like the opposite. Who is going to beat Colorado? But listen, man, they're bowl eligible. Coach Prime has clearly not only is it just bringing, because I know that's what a lot of people want to say. Oh, he just brought celebrities, a lot of hype, but no actual production. There's nothing actually happening that's winning them football games. Now what do you say? From a 1-win team to a bowl eligible team in just 2 years. What do you say now? In the words of Jason Tatum, what they gonna say now? And so I hope Colorado continues to win. They are performing absolutely fantastically. I didn't even anticipate talking about them this long. I just wanted to say, what are they going to say now? But you can't help it. This is just such a beautiful thing to see. And they embrace the hate. And they come out and just keep winning. I've been saying that for weeks now. Everybody keeps waiting for the drop off, and I'm like, they just keep winning. So you can't argue with that. So shout out to Colorado. Shout out to the Buffs there. And then they got 2 Heisman candidates. I don't care if Shedeur is in conversation or not. He should be. He's a fantastic quarterback, and we know what Travis Hunter brings to the table. So Listen, man, watch out for Colorado. They are a scary team here. Um, and speaking of scary teams, I wanted to do something a little different. This is my top 5 list. This is a top 5 list of the scariest teams in college football at this very moment. The teams that you're like, oh my goodness, anybody but them. The scary teams don't have to be the highest ranked teams in the country, right? Like they can be. It's just a team that's like, whew, on the right night, if we play them, I don't know. It's one of those. So here are the top 5 scariest teams in college football right now. This is the Stupid Fans Club list. Number 5, we have boom, Clemson. They could actually be higher on this list. They have an explosive offense. They score points in bunches. And Cade Klubnik has entered the chat of the Heisman candidate race. They are playing fantastic football. They have a respectable defense out there. And ever since that Georgia game, it's like they just flipped a switch. It's like that invigorated them and they turned it on from there. The question you do have about Clemson is, since Georgia, you haven't played a ranked team. And so, I don't think they do, unless somebody just, on this team, one of the teams they have left just goes on a crazy run and becomes ranked. They don't play a ranked team. And so there will always be the question of, is this just what happens against us inferior teams? Because we saw when you did play a ranked team, like the only sample that we have is from Georgia, and it was a different story. So I think they're actually good, but who knows? We may not be able to see it until maybe the ACC championship, but likely the college football playoff. The Clemson Miami game, that would be incredible because it's 2 explosive offenses, and I mean, Miami's defense is questionable, so it's like, which defense is going to step up? That would be an incredible championship matchup there. So yeah, top 5. I got in the number 5 slot. I have Clemson as the number 5 scariest team in college football right now. Number 4, Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been on a run. They had a perplexing start at the beginning of the season where they beat Texas A&M at Texas A&M at night. That is an incredible win. They did come in as the favorites there, but man, how many people have we seen come in as the favorites there and walk out crying? I mean, it is, I say it a million times, it is so tough to play Texas A&M in Texas A&M, but Notre Dame, and then, yeah, they had that big win and then lost to Northern Illinois. And it was like, oh, here we go again. Same old Notre Dame stuff that we deal with every year. Just, we think they're good and they come in with all this hype and then they fall off the face of the earth. So I really like Notre Dame. I think their defense has been playing lights out as well. They did have a tough game. All of the games where you felt like, ooh, this may be a tough test for Notre Dame, they've been showing up. They've been showing up and showing out. That Louisville game, they won 31-24, and that was the most points any team has put up on them this year. And then even the Georgia Tech game, Georgia Tech, respectable team. They went in Atlanta and beat them 31-13. And then, we saw what they did to Navy this past weekend, a 51-14 win. It looks like they mean business and you know they're coming out and putting any team that's inferior, they're putting them down. So Notre Dame right now is a very scary team, and I got them at number 4. Number 3, we talked about them earlier. I got Miami. And the thing with Miami is we know that their offense is explosive. Cam Ward is unbelievable. There's a reason he is in the Heisman race here, and they are just a tough team to take down, a tough team to beat, but ultimately just a tough team to score with. They're going to score a ton of points. They have an electric offense, an electric quarterback, and it's like, can you stop them? Obviously, the question is, if they scored 50 points, the other team might score 49. So, it is a case of if their defense can make enough stops. And I feel like they are a team where their defense makes the needed stops. They make timely stops. But that is the big question, is can they make enough stops against another team like a Clemson who may be able to score with them. But ultimately it's just very tough. They are again just have a great offense, and it seems like nobody has figured it out so far. One of the few undefeated teams left. They do have Duke coming up this week, and that should be a good game. Duke almost took down SMU this past weekend, and Duke is not the old Duke, so that should be a good game. But I think, you got to have Miami favored in the rest of their games, and they are a scary offensive team here. Number 2, we're gonna bring it on home, baby. Bring it on home. We have no other than boom, Georgia. Georgia, after their win over Texas. Listen, folks, Texas was the most complete team. They looked invincible. No test could stand up to Texas all season. They barely showed any flaws at all. And Georgia came into Texas and made them look ordinary with a bad game from Carson Beck. So, the Georgia we saw in Texas, especially that defense, if they play like that, I'm sorry, my dogs, there's not a team in the country that can deal with that. But the question with Georgia will be, what's up with Carson Beck? He has underperformed this entire season, and not the same quarterback that we saw from last year, not the same accuracy, not the same poise. He does have poise, but just makes a lot more mistakes. And so, the expectations may be higher. He's supposed to be a high draft pick this year, and he was in the Heisman talks early in the season. So, and the other question is just like, who are Georgia's weapons this year? It's no McConkey or Bowers, so somebody else has to step up. And at this point, it's just kind of been a team effort. And in that Texas game, we saw Etienne step up big time, which I think they got to lean on more. But listen, ultimately, at that time, Texas was the number 1 team in the country, and nobody seemed to even be able to come close to beating them. And Georgia went in there and just made it look like it was easy. So I got Georgia number 2. If they play like that, they are a scary, scary team. And to wrap it up, we have the number 1 scariest team in the country right now is Oregon. You should know they're the number 1 team in the country. They are undefeated. They beat a really, really good, as we talked about, hyped Ohio State team. And don't mean overhyped, like just a very high expectation Ohio State team. A game where, they were ranked right there with Ohio State, but not a lot of people expected them to win the game, including myself. And every game that it seemed like, okay, well, what about this game? How do y'all perform here? Oregon is answering the bell and getting teams out of here. Like these teams, there's earlier in the season, they had some teams hanging around. They looked suspect. Dylan Gabriel was turning the ball over and had a lot of questions and thought maybe this Oregon team just isn't as good as we thought they would be. I think all that's gone out the window. They are to me the scariest team in the country. They have a explosive offense. They have a good defense, and they are showing that they're maybe not the same Oregon of the past where you can just expect their downfall, wait for their drop off. They're number one team in the country for a reason, and they're going to be tough to beat, especially if you got to go out there to Eugene. So those are my top 5 scariest teams in college football right now. And we'll keep that going. We'll see how things pan out here. 2 honorable mentions on that list. I thought about putting Texas A&M on there, as well as Penn State. These are 2 teams that I have my eye on. The Penn State game, I'm going to wait to see this Ohio State outcome. I want to see how they play against them. But Penn State has been another team where it's kind of waiting for their downfall, waiting to see them take that dive, and they've been showing up each and every week. Had a tough game against Wisconsin last week, and they showed up and showed out. So they are my two honorable mention teams here. But that's the top 5 for this week. And quick hits, just quick games we will touch on here. Alabama, they were able to shut out Missouri. That was on my must-see TV game this week, and I did have big questions about Missouri. I just didn't think they were as strong this year. And, of course, they lost Brady Cook in that game, which definitely hurt and changed that dynamic. But good win for Alabama. They're hanging in there. Alabama just has to hang in there. They have a tough game against LSU coming up, so they're gonna have to deal with that. And it's at LSU, and Alabama just can't afford to lose any more games. So good start here, 34-0 against a ranked team at home. So good win for Alabama there. And then Pitt, this was super surprising for me. Pitt destroyed Syracuse. They made quick work of Syracuse. I think they were up like 30-0 at one point in this game. Like it was never close. This was just a complete bulldozing by Pitt. I was surprised. I'm very high on Syracuse. And they made quick work of Cuse there. So surprising game. And then Penn State, we touched on that. Penn State was able to handle Wisconsin. I didn't put this on my must-see TV game because I just wasn't big on Wisconsin, and I felt like Penn State would handle that game. And no, it was close at some point, but Penn State pulled away big and controlled that game. So good win there, as expected. And then we also touched on the SMU Duke game where Duke lost to SMU by 1 point in overtime. And so close game, close call there for SMU. But more so, I'm thinking about test for Miami. And it seems like Duke may be a good one. Miami doesn't have any ranked teams on their schedule, I don't believe. And this will be a good opportunity to just face a capable challenger, or what on paper seems to be. So excited about that one this weekend. those are the quick hits, and then we will go straight to the top 25 for week 10. We did have LSU dropping after their loss to Texas A&M. They dropped from 8 to 16. So that was a big one. And then you had Texas A&M shoot up to the number 10 spot this week. So they are moving on up in a scary, scary team. Missouri, they dropped down to 25 after their blowout loss to Alabama. I am actually surprised that they are still in the top 25. I guess showing them some grace there, but maybe the loss of your starting quarterback. But yeah, surprised to see that, but they fall as expected. And then Vandy, they were the number 25 team in the country, and they did fall out of the rankings after losing to Texas. Tough game for them. They did come back late, but ultimately Texas was just too much for them. And like I said earlier, Colorado has officially entered the chat. They are number 23. I thought they were going to put them at the 25 spot or something. They put them at 23. I love to see it. I love to see it finally getting the respect they deserve. I mean, they've been winning football games. We got to reward them for that. So we'll see how that plays out. But that was the top 25 going into week 10. And to wrap things up, we have the must-see TV game. We got Ohio State at Penn State. Oh my goodness. I can just feel myself getting chills about that one. And that's the highlight of this week. Then I mentioned Duke at Miami. That'll be a good one to see. I think Duke could possibly give Miami a run for their money. Could be a competitive game, but we'll see. Texas A&M. This one may fly under the radar, but Texas A&M at South Carolina. I think South Carolina showed a lot to us about their defense when they played Alabama, and I'll say it again, should have beaten Alabama. They just could have capitalized on one other big play there. Not turn the ball over, but this should be a tough game here. And again, we mentioned that Texas A&M quarterback dilemma they have. What's going to happen with that? And again, South Carolina has a brutal defense. It's kind of that we're in the SEC. So, and Texas A&M, I'm telling you, it's a cheat code with them playing at home. So they have to go on the road for this one. So that should be an interesting game. And then we have Louisville at Clemson. Louisville, they're going to compete. They are not ranked. They're about a 5-3 team now, I believe, but they're going to compete. And Clemson should have their hands full here. We'll see how the offense looks against them, but I still got them as a scary, scary team. And finally, we have Pitt at SMU. It's a good ranked matchup, 18 versus 20. Again, SMU had that tough game against Duke and had to win it in overtime, and then Pitt just obliterated Syracuse. And so I think these are two evenly matched teams, and we'll see how those play out. But those are the must-see TV games going into Week 10. And listen, another great episode, another great week of college football. I love it so much. We are getting at the final stretch. We're coming up on the final stretch here in the season. These teams have about 3 or 4 more games to show us what they're made of. And so we're getting into the thick of things. We should have the rankings, college football playoffs, the actual rankings coming up soon. So we'll be done with I won't say done, but we'll be done with the AP poll rankings, and we'll get to see where these teams truly are going to end up. So that should be exciting. And listen, like I said, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please subscribe to the YouTube. Follow us on TikTok and Instagram. So much content there. and we'll keep it going. I'm going to keep posting content, man. It seems like you guys are enjoying it. So going to keep posting content, clips, and continue to get better and expand. So again, appreciate all the support, all the love thus far. And that will wrap up our episode for today. Appreciate you joining. See you next week.